Hello. My name is Leah, your digital presenter for today's event. Before we dive into the exciting and informative content we've prepared for you, here's a quick disclaimer. I'm actually an artificial intelligence, AI, designed and programmed to assist with sharing valuable knowledge and resources. I am here to provide evidence-based, up-to-date information and guidance, and will be sharing real stories from my colleagues at FND. Here at FND, we value honesty and transparency in all our interactions. We, at the Family Network on Disabilities, believe that the incredible advancements in technology, such as AI, can significantly enhance our ability to provide families with the resources, support, and information they need. All the information shared in this training comes from the dedicated team of experts at FND who have years of experience, rich understanding, and most importantly, a deep passion for supporting families just like yours. Family Network on Disabilities began in 1985 by a group of parents of children with disabilities who came together looking for mutual support. FND is a grassroots organization for persons with disabilities and their families that is family-centered and family-driven. What makes FND unique is that the majority of our board members, our management staff, and program staff are either individuals with experience with a disability or have family members with a disability, which gives us the perspective of empathy and compassion for the work that we do. Family Network on Disabilities began in 1985 by a group of parents of children with disabilities who came together looking for mutual support. FND is a grassroots organization for persons with disabilities and their families that is family-centered and family-driven. What makes FND unique is that the majority of our board members, our management staff, and our program staff are either individuals with experience with a disability or have family members with a disability, which gives us the perspective of empathy and compassion for the work that we do. Before we begin, I'd like to share a little bit about Family Network on Disabilities. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization helping families across the state. We're funded in part by the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Health through the Health Resources Services Administration. We use all that funding to provide information, resources, and support, and training to families, educators, professionals, and providers throughout the state. We do not charge for our services. At this time, we would like to make a disclaimer that we at FND are not attorneys, doctors, or mental health professionals. We do not offer legal or medical advice in our workshops. We are happy to support you with information, resources, and support. We use research-based information in our training and materials. Today we're going to be talking about the right of students with disabilities to an individualized education plan. So let's get started. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, is our nation's federal special education law. It originated during a time when parents had limited rights, and in the past, families worried about losing their children. They faced the risk of institutionalization, the possibility of their children being expelled from school, and being labeled as uneducable. It's disturbing to reflect on the fact that there was once a time when such a term was in use, implying that people were considered uneducable. It's important to acknowledge that individuals possess varying capacities, and even among typical individuals, there are differences in intelligence. However, these variations should not be misconstrued as making someone uneducable. This is an incredibly important shift in our society. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, is the driving force behind this transformation. It provides clarity, established procedures, and timelines to ensure that everything is carefully considered. The focus is on keeping children in inclusive settings with their typical peers, emphasizing the power of parents and their active participation, along with informed consent. Additionally, IDEA acknowledges that disagreements may arise, which is why it incorporates procedural safeguards and specific timelines. For instance, if you request an evaluation, there's a set timeframe for the response. The same applies to requesting an individualized education program, IEP. All of these critical aspects are outlined in national law. The Individuals with Disability Education Law encompasses 6 major principles. The first principle gives each eligible child with disabilities the right to free appropriate public education or FAPE. 2 is an appropriate evaluation to determine that particular child's educational and individualized needs. Third is the Individualized Education Plan or the IEP. Fourth, the least restrictive environment, or LRE. All students must have access to the least restrictive environment with support before a change of placement to a more restrictive environment is considered. Number 5, parent participation. IDEA is very specific about what schools must do to ensure that parents have the opportunity to be active participants in each step of the special education process. And last, number 6. IDEA includes important procedural safeguards to ensure that the rights of children with disabilities and their parents are protected and that they have access to the information needed to participate in the process effectively. An individualized education plan, or an IEP. In order to ensure that students with disabilities receive an appropriate and individualized education, IDEA requires that, after drawing upon current evaluation information, the IEP team develop a written document, the IEP, designed to meet the unique educational needs of each student with disabilities. IDEA contains clear language about the information that the IEP must contain, who develops the IEP, and the public agency's obligation to provide the special education and related services identified in the IEP. IEPs are developed during IEP team meetings. You will get a written notice from the school before each IEP meeting. The notice will tell you the day, time, and place suggested for the meeting, who will be there, and why the meeting is being held. The school staff want your help in writing the IEP, so they will try to find a day, time, and place that is good for you. Some parents choose to participate in the meeting by telephone or via Skype or Zoom. If you choose not to participate in the meeting, the school may hold the IEP team meeting without you. Even if you do not participate, you will still receive a copy of the IEP. Here are some things to keep in mind about the IEP. The IEP is a plan for your child only. The IEP describes the services your child will receive from the beginning date to the ending date of the IEP, which will be for 1 year or less. Unless an interim meeting is called, a new IEP must be written for your child at least once every year. The people you and your school invite to the IEP team meeting should have knowledge or expertise about your child or the technology your child uses. If the school is going to invite someone from any agency other than the school district, you must give your permission. If you are going to invite someone, it would be helpful if you let the school know who you are inviting. When you sign the IEP, it does not mean you agree with it. Your signature on the IEP form means that you attended the IEP team meeting. It does not mean you give your permission for services to begin. You will be asked to sign a different form to give your permission for services to begin for your child. If you do not agree with the IEP, you can write "Not in Agreement" on the IEP beside your signature. Now let's take a look at the IEP document. The IEP has 9 components and it may include some additional information depending on the individual needs of the student. We'll go over these slide by slide in just a moment. Present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. The present level statement describes what your child is able to do and what they struggle with in academic subjects and functional skills. It may also include information about how your child behaves or communicates with others. It may identify at what grade level your child is performing. The IEP team needs to know what your child knows and can do when it develops your child's IEP. The IEP team also needs to know how your child's disability affects their progress. This information helps determine what your child needs to learn, your child's annual goals, and what services they need. Here are some examples of present-level statements. Based on John's results on the district reading test, John understands what he reads at the 3rd grade level. Based on teachers' and parents' observations, Mary hits people when she is angry, upset, or needs help. Based on parents' observations, Eric writes slowly but he enjoys using the computer and does more of his homework when allowed to use the computer. Measurable annual goals state what your child needs to learn in order to progress in the general curriculum and to meet other needs related to their disability. These goals are based on the present level statement. An IEP may contain 1 or more annual goals. They describe what your child should be able to learn within a year. Annual goals must be measurable. This means that goals should be written so that at the end of the year, the IEP team can tell if your child has learned what was expected. Goals should also be reasonable. The team should not plan too much or too little for your child. Here are some examples of annual goals. By the end of the year, John will independently read a 4th grade textbook and answer comprehension questions with 80% accuracy. By the end of the year, Mary will use words instead of hitting when she is angry, upset, or needs help 80% of the time. By the end of the year, through participating in a keyboarding class, Eric will be able to use a laptop to complete and turn in 95% of his homework assignments on time. For older students, the IEP will include goals related to the student's transition to life after high school. Benchmarks or short-term objectives. Your child's IEP may contain benchmarks or short-term objectives. Benchmarks and short-term objectives are only required for students who take the Florida Alternate Assessment (FAA). For other students, they are optional. The IEP team makes the decision about including benchmarks and short-term objectives. Benchmarks are major milestones between the present levels of performance and annual goals. Short-term objectives are similar, but usually cover smaller steps. However, many people use these terms to mean the same thing. Benchmarks and short-term objectives, like annual goals, should be written to fit your child's needs. The IEP should list all the important steps needed to master the goals the IEP team has set, but it is not a daily lesson plan. The benchmarks and short-term objectives should not be so small that your child could achieve them in a day or two. Description of how child's progress will be measured and reported to parents. Throughout the year, you and the school will keep track of how well your child is doing. The IEP must describe how your child's progress toward their annual goals will be measured and how you will be regularly informed of that progress. It will also describe how often you will receive reports about your child's progress. The IEP describes each ESE service, related service, accommodation or modification, support, or supplementary aid for your child. It may also list the title of the person who will make sure that your child receives each service. Services, aids, and supports are help that your child may need in order to benefit from school. They are devices and services that allow children with disabilities to be educated with children without disabilities as much as possible. Some children do not need any additional services, aids, or supports, while other children need several. Sometimes the best way to help your child is to help your child's teachers. Any support that will be provided for your child's teachers should be listed on the IEP as well. Your child may need changes in teaching or testing in order to make progress and demonstrate what they have learned. The IEP describes these changes. Accommodations are changes to the way a student accesses instructions and demonstrates what they know. Students who need accommodations but not modifications usually work toward a standard diploma. Accommodations are usually tried before considering modifications. Modifications are permitted for students pursuing Florida's Access Points graduation pathway, a specialized route tailored to accommodate the unique educational needs of students with significant cognitive disabilities in Florida. This pathway serves as an alternative approach to graduation, recognizing that these students may require tailored adjustments to the standard curriculum in order to make meaningful strides toward their educational objectives. It's important to note that in Florida, there are 2 additional options: the academic and employment pathways, where career and technical education (CTE) courses can substitute for related subjects. The access pathway is also exclusively available to students with disabilities, further highlighting the state's commitment to inclusivity and personalized learning experiences. The IEP must include a statement about any accommodations that will be made for your child when taking the Florida Standards Assessments, FSA. The FSA assesses students in various subjects, including English Language Arts, ELA, mathematics, and science. An accommodation to the FSA statewide assessment should only be requested when used regularly in the classroom setting. If your child uses an accommodation in the classroom that is not allowed for state assessments, you must sign forms describing the accommodation and tell you which test will not allow its use. Some examples of testing accommodations may be an interpreter uses sign language to give the directions for a test to a child who cannot hear. A child takes a 3-hour test in 3 separate 1-hour sessions rather than in one long session. Or, a child responds to the test questions orally rather than the way other students do, such as with paper and pencil or on a computer. If the IEP team decides that your child will not take a particular state or district-wide assessment, the IEP must include an explanation of why that assessment is not appropriate for your child and how your child will be tested instead. This is called an alternate assessment. Federal and state laws require that all students be included in statewide testing. Most students with disabilities take the Florida Comprehensive Assessment Test, FCAT or FCAT 2.0, along with general education students. A small number of students with significant cognitive disabilities take the Florida Alternate Assessment. The FAA is for students with disabilities who require direct intensive instruction in skills needed for community living, leisure, and vocational activities. When Congress first passed the Education for All Handicapped Children Act in 1975, now the IDEA, the purpose was to make sure all children with disabilities had access to a free, appropriate public education. Before that time, states had different laws, and not all children with disabilities could attend public schools. To receive federal funds, a state's plans must include a promise that a child with a disability will only be removed from a regular classroom if the nature or severity of their disability interferes to such a degree that education, even with additional supports and services, cannot be satisfactorily achieved in a regular class. Students must be placed in the least restrictive environment possible. The IEP team's decisions about where your child will be taught are called placement decisions. Your child's placement will be based on your child's needs. You and the rest of the IEP team will begin by assuming that your child will be taught in the same classroom and school your child would attend if they did not have a disability. The IEP team will work together to identify services and supports that will help your child succeed in general classes and other school activities. Only if the team decides that your child will not be able to make progress in general classes will they consider having your child spend part or all of the day in ESE classes, which is a more restrictive placement. There is a continuum of LRE placement ranging from least restrictive, 1, to most restrictive, 6. Possible placements include the following. Beginning with 1. A general education classroom with supports. A student spends the entire day in general education with some push-in supports, like assistive technology or accommodations. General education with pull-out supports. A student spends the majority of their day in general education with some time spent in a separate classroom, a resource or pull-out classroom, with the special education teacher, speech therapist, or occupational therapist, depending on what they need. A special education class, also called self-contained. A student spends the majority of their academic day in a class with other students with disabilities. They may go to general education for things like music, art, and assemblies. Separate school or program. A student spends their day in a school or program that is specifically designed to address their learning needs. Homebound instruction. A student receives services at home because their disability is such that they cannot attend class in a school setting. Residential placement. A student receives education in a separate school that doubles as a residential placement. These different types of placements make up the range of placements. Which school your child attends is based on the district's plan for school zones and on which schools offer the services your child needs. Some types of services may be available in many school districts. Other types of services may only be available in a few schools. The time that a child remains in the general education classroom using supplementary aids, accommodations, or services and the time they spend in another setting is decided on an individual basis by the IEP team. The team must first consider what it would take to support the child's learning in the general education classroom with students without disabilities. No matter where the child receives instruction, the specialized materials, technology, services, or accommodations will be written into the IEP and made available to meet the child's learning needs. In almost every case, the local public school district will be able to offer the services and placement your child needs. However, if the IEP team decides that your child needs a placement that the local school district does not offer, your school district may look for another school district or private school to provide the services. If the IEP team decides that your child will go to a school in another district or to another school, transportation will be provided at no cost to you. Each type of information described above must be included in your child's IEP. Some school districts include other information in the IEP to make it more useful. Here are some of the things that may be added. Physical education. This tells the type of physical education your child will receive, whether it be general or specially designed. Information on parent participation, which describes what the school has done to notify you about IEP team meetings and to help you participate. Child's or parent's language. This informs what language your family speaks. Health and medical information, goes over any special health or medical problems your child has. Diploma option, which tells what type of high school diploma your child is working toward. You will receive regular reports on your child's progress toward their IEP goals. As your child grows and changes, and as you and the school staff learn new things about your child, the IEP will need to be changed. As you work together, you will find ways to make the IEP more useful. When your child turns 12, they should participate in meetings, and the IEP team will start discussing what you and your child's plans are for after high school. The IEP team will also identify the course of study and services needed to help your child prepare for life after high school. Here you can see our FND family. These are the programs housed under the Family Network on Disabilities. Each program provides a unique service to a specific population. There are 3 PTE programs, funded by the U.S. Department of Education through the Office of Special Education Programs. POPN serves North Florida. PSN serves Southwest Florida. And PEN serves Southeast Florida. The Family Star program, funded by the U.S. Department of Health under the Health Resources Services Administration and supports families of youth with special health care needs. FND also has a special needs trust where we provide families with information regarding creating and supporting a special needs trust. We also do programming specific to fathers raising children with disabilities. Here you can see links from multiple downloadable resources available in various languages. You can also see some of our social media platforms. We have various pages on Facebook addressing the needs of different populations and our programs. I invite you to check out our website at www.fndusa.org for the hundreds of pages of resources and invaluable information that you can access and download at no charge. You can reach us to help you and your family by giving us a call at 800-825-5736 and letting us know your needs. You'll be assigned to a staff person who can support you. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Visit our website for valuable resources and more information. We want to thank you for spending this time with us during this presentation. We look forward to hearing from you.